When analysing a source, it's important to realise that all sources were created for a particular individual or group of people. Discovering who the original audience was will help you understand why the source was made and how it had affected the creation of a source. For example, the source's creator may have used specific words or mentioned particular events based upon who they were writing to. Identifying such decisions can help you to determine whether a source is useful or reliable for your historical studies. Therefore, knowing who the intended audience of a source was can help you come to an informed evaluation of it. What is an intended audience? The audience of a historical source is the individual person or group of people who were originally intended to view or use it. Based on what you know about the time the source was created and who created it, you need to identify for whom the source was originally created. How do you determine the audience? Some sources make it easy for you to discover who the intended audience was, because they may specifically address them. For example, if your source is a letter, it might simply begin with "Dear John," in which case John clearly is the intended audience of this source. However, most of the time, you'll be required to make an informed guess regarding the original reader or viewer. The first things you need to discover are what kind of source it is, the person who created it, and the time of its creation. Determining these three things can help you make an informed decision about who the most likely recipient of a source was. To help you further in determining the intended audience, here are some common audiences for specific types of sources. Academic journals are usually made for university academics and students. Books are made for members of the general public who are interested in the topic of the book. A diary is usually written for the creator themselves to read. Government documents are created for the use of government employees and departments. Letters are written for the specific person who is mentioned at the start of the letter. Newspapers and the articles in them are written to be read by the general public. Textbooks are designed to be read by high school or university students studying the specific topic of the book. And websites are predominantly created to be read by members of the general public. So now that you know what an intended audience is and how to determine them, let's look at some examples to solidify your learning. The first example is a very famous diary written by the young Jewish girl Anne Frank. She began writing in her diary when she was 13 years old and records her experience hiding from the Nazis with her family during World War II. Tragically, Anne and her family were discovered and most of them died while in Nazi concentration camps. As it is a diary, Anne only ever intended it to be a private document and for her eyes only. Therefore, the intended audience for Anne Frank's diary was the author herself. As a side note, even though Anne's father eventually decided to publish the diary for the general public, the original audience was only ever Anne herself. Our second example is the Eiffel Tower in Paris, France, which was built between 1887 and 1889. It was constructed for the purpose of showing off France's industrial skill during the 1889 World's Fair, which was held in Paris. The World's Fair was an international event at which countries demonstrated their latest technological achievements to other nations. During the 1889 World's Fair, over 32 million people from more than 30 countries visited the exhibition and saw the brand new Eiffel Tower, which served as the entrance gate to the event. Therefore, the intended audience of the Eiffel Tower were the international visitors to the 1889 World's Fair. As an additional note, the Eiffel Tower was originally planned to be deconstructed 20 years after the fair, but it proved so popular that it remains to this day. Regardless, the intended audience remains the original visitors to the 1889 World's Fair. Now that you have a better understanding of the intended audience of historical sources, I hope that you feel more confident in your studies. If you need further explanations, examples and advice, head over to historyskills.com and I'll see you next time.